medicine. But when they are abused, what then happens? We're talking about breaking the power of opioids abuse and how Ghana is racing against time to save its youthful population from addiction to these dangerous substances. We discuss the issues as we focus on this dangerous substance and how it finds its route illegally into the country for the wealth of a few, but to the detriment of many. Well, we have a BBC documentary that highlights the issue, after which I'll be introducing my guests in the studio. But for now, what are the details? Let's find out.
Illegal, addictive opioids are flooding the streets of West Africa, destroying thousands of lives and fueling a public health crisis. It's happening in Côte d'Ivoire, in Ghana, in Nigeria. But where are these pills coming from?
5 million tablets.
How are they getting into West Africa?
I think this is wickedness.
And who are the people making a killing from them?
This is very unfair for us. But nowadays this is
I'm on my way to the Nigerian Drugs Enforcement Agency, the NDLEA. Their checkpoints have become a common sight on the streets of Lagos. In 2023, they seized opioids worth more than $100 million.
This year, all this is 225 tramadol.
Which is illegal. Tramadol is a catch-all name to describe the range of opioids used as street drugs. It's estimated more than 4 million people in Nigeria are misusing some form of opioid.
We're having a problem coming in from another country. It has become a big menace in Nigeria.
And which country is that?
India.
Yeah. In 2018, the government banned the sale of tramadol without prescription and cracked down on the import of illegal opioids. Since then, more and more are being smuggled across the borders.
These shipments came in through Ghana, through the borders. They have been tracking him for 5 months.
Would you say that the route between Ghana and Nigeria is becoming more popular in the last year or so?
Definitely, it is.
Tamale in northern Ghana has been hit hard by a recent rise in opioid use. Journalist Yaya Masahudu grew up here.
These drugs are destroying families, destroying young men and women with potential who otherwise would have been able to help in developing this country.
It's got so bad, locals have set up their own task force to track down the opioid dealers.
I'm Saki, and this is Chairman Jamal, operation leader.
A tip-off has led them to one of the poorest neighborhoods in Tamale.
They'll be raiding the place to see if they can get some of the drugs.
Let's go.
What is happening right now is the task force is here to arrest the drug dealers. It's an addict who has taken the drugs. This is what they found here with just one ring. Yeah. This is what happens almost on a daily basis.
These opioids are highly addictive. Some take them as painkillers or to help them get through hard physical work. But many use them simply to get high. They can cause breathing problems and seizures. Overdosing can kill.
The main idea behind the interrogation is to get to find out who the suppliers are. The chief adjudicates the matter and someone is found guilty. The person is fined some amount of money.
You know it's not this medicine. So who will be your supplier? You don't know the supplier. You see how you disgrace yourself to this low. Look at kids are watching you.
The man in yellow is just a small-time dealer. But who is at the top of this chain? These packets are all we have to go on. But they do offer some clues.
Hi, it's Ravi.
Hi, Aya. Good to see you.
Did you get the photos I sent you from the raid the task force did the other day?
Yeah, I have them pulled up on my computer now.
The product is called Tafrodol. The Ghanaian FDA have confirmed to me the product is illegal in Ghana.
Then I can also see that it says made in India. And if I zoom into the corner, there's a logo with an A and a leaf.
It's important to look into that and to find out who is responsible for bringing the product into West Africa. The task force is trying to catch the traders and smugglers, but it's the source that needs to be stopped.
So let me start there and I'll get back to you when I have more information. We know the drugs are made in India. Now we need to find out who is making them. When I put Tafrodol into a search engine, the top result shows that the brand name Tafrodol is registered to a company called Aveo Pharmaceuticals. When I look for Aveo Pharmaceuticals, their official website shows up, which actually details their products and manufacturing practices. It looks like a legitimate company, but it's the logo that really catches my attention. I found teenagers in Côte d'Ivoire are mixing Tafrodol with an alcoholic drink called vodka. And there it is, the same logo. Aveo Pharmaceuticals. It's not just Côte d'Ivoire. Even in Ghana, I found reports of Tafrodol being seized by the police. When I zoom in, there is an A which looks like the A from Aveo. In the same seizure is another product, Tima King. In the corner of that box, the same logo, Aveo Pharmaceuticals. We also send out researchers in Nigeria to see if they could find products with the Aveo logo on them. And sure enough, they came back to us with Tafrodol XX. We know the name of the company. Now we need to find the people at the top. An undercover operative agreed to go to Aveo's factory, posing as a businessman looking to supply opioids to Nigeria.
We're here to see Mr. Sharma. Thank you. So nice to see you.
This is one of the directors of Aveo and the boss of this factory, Vinod Sharma. He takes them on a tour of the factory.
We came across like a shrewd businessman. He actually showed us that the factory is certified by the World Health Organization. That cemented the impression of the world-class standard. Yes. You guys are doing really massive operation.
5 million tablets.
Back at Sharma's office, it's time to talk business.
This is sample, pattern, full tablet, everything is.
The packet of Tafrodol is instantly recognizable. It's the same brand found on the streets in Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. This is Super Royal. It looks just like the drugs found in Lagos. This is Tima King, the same product seized by the Ghanaian police in 2024. Vinod Sharma displays many more products that look remarkably similar to those found by authorities across West Africa.
This is very powerful. Tablet is very powerful compared to the capsule. But red is very different. Double power.
About how they came up with the opioids that they make as a reaction to government program on tramadol, which they used to also make. They also had a clear understanding of the global shipping business, the logistics of the operation.
By air is not possible nowadays because government is looking very strictly. And you can supply by the sea, but on the other port, not Lagos, on the other Ghana and other. Otherwise, police can arrest, capture the container.
Clearly, he knew that what he was producing was illegal, but the fact that he was willing to talk about producing the opioids for me, branding the opioids for me, and shipping the opioids, to West Africa for me. All of that spoke to a businessman who was willing to take a lot of risk.
I can clear from our custom, means India. You can clear from your side. Every client working like this.
Sharma doesn't flinch when the team tells him who they're planning to sell the opioids to.
Do you have local market in the Nigeria? We can supply these materials.
So we do. And our plan is to sell to young people. 16, 17-year-olds, we find that they all love the product, right? And like you said earlier on, the product, Tafrodol, has really replaced tramadol in the market.
This item is Tafrodol is a painkiller. But suppose you can use the 2 or 3 tablets in the one time, you can like this relax.
This is what the kids like. That's what they like. You said that's high.
High.
It's high.
This is very harmful for the health. But
Very harmful.
But customer cannot understand. He wants relax.
They want to relax.
Any medicine can misuse. This is very harmful for the body. But nowadays this is a business.
Nigerian journalists have been reporting on this opioid crisis for more than 20 years. Finally, I was face to face, not with some local dealer or transnational smuggler, but actually one of the men at the root of Africa's opioid crisis.
Capturing market, slowly.
One of the men who actually makes this opioid and ships it into our countries by container load. It's depressing watching someone who produces these opioids speaking about it and describing it simply as business.
In India, any drug made only for export must comply with the requirements of the importing country. Ghana's drug authorities told us this product doesn't meet their import requirements. By shipping Tafrodol to Ghana, AVO is breaking Indian law. Now we know who's making the drug, but how is it getting into Ghana?
Oh, this is it. You can see Samos Pharma written.
We found evidence that a company in the capital Accra has handled millions of the pills.
I'm not very sure that these guys are going to be friendly and whether they will allow us to film.
This is the evidence that led us to Samos Pharma. Export data showing that Samos has imported millions of opioid pills from India through Ghanaian ports by a company called Westfin International. Looking into Westfin, we found the board of directors. Among them, a familiar name, Vinod Sharma. In Tamale, it's left for groups like the Citizens Task Force to tackle the opioid crisis. More of Vinod Sharma's Tafrodol. That evening, they gather in a local park to burn the drugs. This task force in one small corner of West Africa is doing all they can. But as these drugs burn, production lines in India are churning out millions more. And the people who make them are getting rich on the profits of other people's misery.
And if you thought that was concerning, wait till you hear from our guests joining the conversation this morning. This is like a killer on the loose. But how do we resolve the issue? Well, joining us for starters in the studio, we have Dr. Albert Sedo here. He's a specialist psychiatrist at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Doc, good morning.
Good morning.
How bad is the situation? Let's start from there.
Okay, so it's addiction, all right? And it's a business, a big business, like the businessman said on the documentary. So people get you to lose control of use of a substance or behavior, and you can't do anything about it. It starts with you engaging in it impulsively, then it continues with engaging in it compulsively. So you can't do anything about it. So you start by using the drug, and after some time, the drug begins to use you, or the behavior you engage in it, and then the behavior begins to control you. So in this particular case of the tafrodol, it starts from the back of tramadol. And because tramadol is now become known as a controlled drug, the businessmen, we can say the evil businessmen, have decided to tweak it into a different brand, tafrodol, which one is even more deadly because it is combined with a muscle relaxant, that's a cariprazole. And so the tafrodol has tapentadol, which is an opioid, a synthetic opioid, which means it is purely lab made. It's not natural. It's a chemical made in the lab intentionally.
Which likely makes it more dangerous.
Yes. It's made in the lab intentionally to act in certain ways. Pain relief, it can induce sleep and also cause euphoria. That's how it works. And then combined with a muscle relaxant. The muscle relaxant also helps with pain relief. But because of this combination, and because both of them, the tapentadol and the cariprazole, have addictive potential, which means when you begin using them, there's going to come a time where you will need more of it. That's tolerance. You need more dose of the same substance to have the same effect. Then after some time, you keep on increasing the dose and increasing the dose and increasing the dose. When you lose control of the use, you will continue using, not because now you want to use it, but because if you stop, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms,
right?
Which is opposite of what you get if you were on the medications, or on the drugs. For example, when you take the tafrodol, you might have euphoria, you might be a little drowsy. So people you see who are sleepy, sled,
like the gentleman we saw who was completely knocked out.
Even yesterday, I saw a story, I think my Ghana News, of somebody in Ashanti region who entered a car, took one of the opioids and slept. And they had to drop him off on the road. So you get an opposite effect. It gives them some pleasure feeling, some relaxing feeling. That's what they go for. And euphoria, a lot of people who use it are like laborers. They use it because they want to work harder, longer. That's what they want. So when you stop using, you have the negative effect. Now the negative effect, the opposite effect, is what you don't like. So you have to continue using, not because you like it or you want to, but because you have to.
Now you become dependent on it.
That's the word. So your system has changed in certain ways that you will need it to live your daily normal life. After long-term use, you would need these substances. So because of the addictive nature, you keep on using. And because it's business, it can start with somebody saying, they give you a sample. Like the gentleman said, they gave him a sample, now he can't buy, but he will go doing anything just to get money to buy more. So once you become addicted, it's a whole new game. And addiction in the past, 40, 50 years ago, wasn't accepted as a disease, but now it is. A chronic brain disorder that's characterized by compulsively engaging in behaviors and or substances, despite negative consequences. So at a point, you are aware it's affecting you. But because of the withdrawal effect, you have to keep using it. You find yourself in a helpless situation.
And it's even more dangerous when you're talking young people.
Yes.
Very impressionable, in some instances, pardon the use of the word, gullible.
Yes.
And of course, they also lack, because of a certain lack of maturity, they
Yes.
also lack some control. And then they will end up doing all kinds of things just to get that high.
Yes, so you speak of young people. When you start using drugs earlier, your chances of becoming dependent on it for a longer period, having much more negative, are highest compared to everybody else. You know, there's a control center, that's a prefrontal cortex. That's where we make our decisions, executive functioning. The decisions you make and all those things are from your prefrontal cortex. It's somehow fully matured after 24 years. If you start using drugs at an earlier stage, you begin to lose that maturity. There will be delayed maturation of your prefrontal cortex, which means your decision making will be faulty for a very long time. And these young people now become dependent on these drugs. And now these drugs will cause brain rewiring. There will be changes in your brain, the structure of the brain itself. There will be changes in the brain that will take a longer time to remodel when you stop. But because you become dependent on it, you are likely to continue using. And some of these ones act as gateway drugs, which means when you start with one, you keep on adding others because the effect you had in the first place,
right,
you may not be having it again with the same doses, so you want to add on others to have different effects. And the reason why they use it mostly, it's multifactorial, all right? Genetics is 50% contributing factor. So two people can use the same drug. The effect you will have may be different from another person. And the chances of the one person stopping may be lower. The other person may be able to stop on his own at will. But if you are genetically predisposed to it, say it runs in families, there's genetic predisposition, maybe in the family people have alcohol use disorder or other forms of substance use disorder, you are at a very high risk that if you touch any substance that has addictive potential, you are likely to go down that rabbit hole.
And it's important when you say go down that rabbit hole, like Alice in Wonderland. But hold for me, I'll come right back to you. Let me bring in William Edum Ado. He is president of the Pharmaceutical Importers and Wholesalers Association. Good morning, sir. Hello, William. Good morning. You would have to unmute for me. I hear you talking, but you've not unmuted. Can you unmute for me, please, Mr. Edum?
I've done so.
Right. It's a great pleasure hosting you. Just give me a little time. I just want a final point from Doc in the studio, and I'll come to you because you also play a crucial role in this entire development. I just want this clarity before I go to the importers.
Yes.
What class of drugs do we refer to as opioids? What class of drugs? And are there safe ones? Obviously, there's a safe use of it. And that then dovetails into the strength of the product, right? So what class are referred to or is referred to as opioids?
So opioids are generally, it's an umbrella term of substances that resemble opiates.
Okay.
So opiates are naturally existed from opium poppy, the opium poppy plant. That's the Papaver somniferum, yeah. So opioids look like. So opioids is an umbrella term that includes opiates plus other synthetic substances. The synthetic ones are the ones made in the lab to act the same way as the natural ones. The natural ones include morphine and codeine. Those are, and then tebane. Those are naturally existing. They act on certain receptors we call opioid receptors in your body. But the synthetic ones are intentionally made in the lab to act in a similar way. It relieves pain and it induces sleep. So they can use it in anesthesia to put patients to sleep for operation and all that to relieve pain. And it has the chance of also causing euphoria. That is, so it's that effect that most people use it for, the euphoric effect. So most of the patients, so that's opioid. It's an umbrella term that encompasses.
In other words, then it becomes recreational rather than medicinal.
So there are safe ones where we prescribe, where we say, okay, take this particular opioid for this duration of time, this strength per dose, you are restricted, you're prescribed. But then if you have that genetic predisposition where you tend to want to use it more, what happens is now you don't only use it for the medical purpose, you now use it for recreational purpose, for other things. So maybe it was for pain relief, but now you're using it for the euphoric effect. You're using it because when you get off it, The way you feel, you don't like it, that's a withdrawal effect.
I see. Hold for me. Let me bring in Mr. Edum Ado now. Please, Dr. Edum Ado, I beg your pardon. As far as the Pharmaceutical Importers and Wholesalers Association is concerned, how long have you been aware of this situation in terms of these, I might as well call them contraband, being brought into the country?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning to your listeners. Yes, with this minutes, I think last year or two, the issue of tramadol came up. And before the tramadol issue, we are all aware of the issue of other abusive substances that were causing havoc. So with the tramadol, what made it very up on the scale was because it was a pharmaceutical product which was being prescribed and being abused. That's why the tramadol came up. In the recent one that we are having, we realize that it's also a pharmaceutical product that is being abused to a level that is not very appropriate for any country.
So your appreciation then of the problem, yes, we do know that it started off as tramadol. There were some bans put in place, but now it's been changed. If you look at Avio, for example, they have used names like, well, in the past tramadol, and now they have names like Tafrodol, Tamking, Tamdol, and all of that in the system. When did you get cognizance of these on our market? Is it from when this piece came out, this documentary, or have you been in the know?
No, it's just when this documentary came up. And also you realize that the tramadol, the active ingredients in tramadol is different from what we are having now. Because they are two separate compounds, as they all behave similarly. Just the tramadol is, if you take the tramadol within the acceptable dosage form, the addiction rate is lower. Because I realized that with the tramadol, the milligram that they were using was very high. So they were getting the euphoria that the doctor is talking about. However, with this particular one, the combination of the two substances, it's not even registered as a medical product anywhere in the world. And it's not recognized as such. However, a business person in India decided to combine two powerful medications to create problems in other parts of the world, which is very unfortunate.
Indeed, very unfortunate. Let me also bring into the conversation Dr. Kwame Sapong-Asiedu, of course, Doctor of Pharmacy. He's a CDD Fellow on Public Health in Ghana. Doc, good morning. Dr. Kwame Sapong-Asiedu, if you can hear me. Good morning, sir.
Morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. It's a pleasure having you. My first question, we have a medical doctor, Dr. Sedo here in the studio, who has given us education on what these products are and the harmful effects. We just heard from Dr. Edum Ado as well about the combination and everything. But my first question to you, since this is your sphere of operation, why is it so easy for such drugs to find their way into our country? It's not just Ghana, it's Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire. But the question is why? What do you know?
Well, okay, thanks. And good morning to Dr. Edum Ado. I know him personally, and good morning to the other panelists and listeners. Well, it's as simple as this. If you follow the trail of movement of drugs in international commerce, drugs are categorized into schedules. And in most countries, if you, if you traffic what's called a Schedule 2 drug or a Class A drug, you get sentenced to death and you get hanged or shot. With the newer, classes of opioids, what we call the new opioid modulating drugs like tramadol, you don't get shot. You get a prison sentence or sometimes you get fined. In fact, in Ghana, if you look, a lot of them get administrative fines. So the punitive implications of your actions are low and the remuneration is high. The second thing is that these drugs are, implicated highly in crime. So you find them being used in terrorist areas. If you scour the internet or you go onto the website of the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime, you'd realize that they are highly implicated in terrorist attacks. In Nigeria, for example, they are widely used by Boko Haram. A number of Boko Haram suicide bombers have been found with high-dose tramadol on them. If you go to the Sahel areas, you'd realize that there are a lot of these jihadists who've been found with, tapentadol and carisoprodol combinations on them. And why do they do that? Because it gives them what we call acute euphoria. And when they have acute euphoria, they can shoot, harm, or maim you without having any consequence. In Ghana, some armed robbers have been found with some of these products on them. So that answers your question that when you have a highly addictive medication that attracts lower punitive sentencing across the world, then the likelihood of criminal elements who understand the movement of drugs in international commerce to move from the cocaines, heroines, and dimorphines to this one, knowing that they wouldn't risk their life, is the main driver of some of these things.
But Dr. Siodu, quick point. If we know, you mentioned class 2 drugs and the punitive measures in other jurisdictions per the World Health Organization and what other countries have. Why then have we lowered the bar to just maybe prison terms and fines and all of that? In fact, it's instructive. If you listen to Vinod Kumar Sharma, who is behind this, Avio Pharmaceuticals and all of that, at a point, he says, when he's being interrogated or being spoken to, he says, oh yes, these drugs are very harmful to health. He is very well aware, very harmful to health, but then he adds, but the customer doesn't know this. This is someone who is fully aware of the consequences, is still producing it without regard for life. Why then, at least within our jurisdiction, do we still have less punitive measures? Why?
Well, it's all down to the classification of medication globally. So, like I said, there are different receptors for which addiction occurs. And for most of these medications, they are to start with either very strong muscle relaxants or very strong analgesics. Opioids are very strong analgesics. So used in the right dose. In fact, there's a lot of research that indicates that if you took opioid for pain, even though tolerance builds up, the likelihood of resistance is not that high. But when you take it for recreation, because those receptors are not having any interference from your body, which says you are feeling pain, the likelihood of addiction is extremely high. So the classification of medication worldwide has been dependent on their medicinal use, not on their recreational use. So if you go into pharmacies or into hospitals, for example, until recently, you would realize that tramadol could be sold over the shelf, whereas morphine, dimorphine, and oxycodone and the likes would be locked up. That is the classification we have to work with globally, and that comes from the body of research. Now let's come to a drug like tapentadol. Tapentadol in recent times has had its, classification downgraded significantly. In fact, in the UK, it's now a class 2 because it is very, very addictive. The problem becomes for some of these drugs, if you look at it and you look at our jurisdiction like Ghana, tapentadol is not in open use. And therefore, it doesn't come to the attention of the Narcotics Control Commission, the Food and Drugs Authority, and the Pharmacy Council regularly from a professional use compared with the other opioid analgesics. So until recently that it started showing up, It wasn't a drug that even a lot of pharmacists or pharmaceutical scientists had dealt with in active practice. If you speak to a lot of pharmacists, they wouldn't even be able to tell you the mechanism of action by which tapentadol, for example, leads to pain relief, because it's just not used. It's not that they are not intelligent, it's just not used. And therefore, now that it has become an issue, I am quite sure between the FDA, Parliament, Narcotics Control Commission, the classification will change. Because I am quite surprised that a drug like tapentadol can be obtained on the open market, though illegally. And that is the problem with regulation. You are always chasing the bad guys. They have to show up for you to react. Some regulators are proactive. They don't wait for them to show up in their country. The minute they see them showing up close to their borders, they react. And perhaps that may be where our regulators have been slightly slow. And that might answer your question.
Right. Let me go to Dr. Edumado and I'll come back into the studio. If you watch the documentary, and it just showed again, Nigerian authorities, the journalists have been reporting on this abuse, the crisis of opioids, for about 20 years. And now it has come to a head. And in Ghana, we've also had our crisis for a number of years, maybe up to about a decade long. And now it is crystallizing. For you, the pharmaceutical importers, how much regulation goes into importing pharmaceutical products to ensure that from your end, none of your members are bringing in these illicit drugs?
Yes, thank you. As Pharmaceutical Importers and Wholesalers Association, we try as much as possible to self-regulate ourselves before even the normal regulatory agency come in. And normally, if you want to import any medication into the country, you have to register the product with Food and Drugs Authority. And at times, they go to the factory to do their inspection, clearance, before the products are registered, after going through all the regulatory and documentation processes. So to do such thing, which normally is done underground, it becomes very difficult for anybody to detect, unless, as Dr. Bamisapon said, the intelligence is very strong. And we have to be very proactive, as he said, because once it's happening in other countries, you have to know that it can also happen in your country. And what I keep asking myself is, over the years, how have we been proactive when it comes to illicit drugs, importation and trading, or abuse in the system? You go to most of these so-called villages and you'll be surprised that people are abusing cocaine, heroin, all kinds of things. And for me, it's very disastrous, because to treat somebody who is addicted is very expensive. And even the possibility of you being successful is very limited. So we have to be very proactive. We have to do a lot of education to prevent people even from getting into such a situation to begin with. Because to rehabilitate those people who are addicted is very expensive. And also, it takes a lot of effort, and it's a cost to the national health insurance, and it breaches the security of even the country. Because as Dr. Bamisapon said, most of these terrorists and all kinds of, that's what they use. These armed robbers, that's what they use. So it poses a national security risk. And personally, I think we have to do more than we are doing currently. Because a stitch in time saves nine. And unfortunately, it's moved from one product to the other. And we have to look at our punitive actions. Because if the person benefits from an illegality, then it becomes a problem. At the detriment of other citizens, then it's not right at all.
You say we have to do certain things, take certain actions. Who are we? And you as an association, what measures do you have in place to stem the tide of same or actually prevent it from happening? Briefly on that.
Yes. To prevent, as an association, we are a regulated association. And we comply with the regulations in this country. However, we have the Security and National Intelligence Bureau, the CID, we have our borders, we have the customs, we have the immigration. You know, we have to coordinate our activities. We have to be more proactive because at the end of the day, somebody who is dealing in a criminal activity will never come out in the open. It's like an underground world where all kinds of things happen. So our security agencies will have to be in the forefront to ensure that the intelligence is right. Because for me, but for this BBC news, well, I wouldn't have known that there's even Tafradol in this country. You know, meanwhile, it's out there being sold. So if our intelligence is proactive enough, by now we should have picked it. By now, education should have been going on. However, it didn't happen. That's why I'm saying between FDA, between the security agencies, we have to share information so that whatever is going on, the public is aware. Because at times, we feel hiding information, right? It doesn't help.
Right.
We have to share information for people to know what is happening, for parents to be on guard concerning their wards, for the communities to know that this is what is going on. You know, so that everybody is very alert. Because once the person starts using the product, the whole community is in trouble because it becomes a danger to the whole society. So, as an association, Pharmaceutical Importers and Wholesalers Association, we will continue to do our bit. And we will play with the security agencies to also up their game so that at the end of the day, we will live in a more peaceful environment.
Hold for me, Doc. Let me come into the studio and maybe expatiating on part of the problem, the different aspects of our society and how we look at this. I see a comment coming through. One person says, I know people whose lives are being destroyed with these drugs, and I know some pharmacies that sell them. And someone else responds, and so what? So I guess it tells you about the different interests and the different facets to this conversation. Education. I'll go back to what Vinod said, Vinod Sharma, who is, helming Avio Pharmaceuticals. They are very harmful to health, but the customer doesn't know.
Yes.
You've also told me here that it's the dosage or the strength of the prescription that is in question, because it can be used for proper purposes, depending on whether it's what is legitimate or illegitimate. So how much then should we be doing when it comes to education on this matter?
So that is why we need education, awareness creation is very important. Most of these young people or people in general who are using these drugs that are being sold openly are not even aware of the dangers that are associated with it. They are not aware of its high addictive potential, which means, like I said earlier, you start using it, and after some time, the drug continues to use you, which means you use, even though you don't want to use, you have to use so that you can go about your daily life, your daily activities. If they were aware of this, that when you start using small doses of, say, tramadol or tafrodol or any of them, say you start with 50 milligram, after some time you'll be using 200 milligram, then after some time you're using 1,000 milligram. That is tolerance. You need higher dosing to have the same effect. Then withdrawal effect, which is when you stop it, you're going to have the negative of what you were having when you were on it. So you go back, not because you want to, but out of compulsion, you have to continue your daily life. If they knew this, nobody would start life to become a junkie. Nobody who uses any drugs wants to become a junkie. They see the pictures and the videos, and nobody wants to be likened to them. But there are lots of people who are dependent on these drugs, addicted to these drugs, and most of them find themselves, like I said earlier, in a helpless situation. There is help available. There is treatment available, but just like my senior person said, it's expensive to rehabilitate these people. When you come to us, most often they are reported, most people at workplaces or at homes, their parents or their colleagues or the superiors report a decline in performance at work, making common mistakes or avoidable mistakes, and sometimes their behavior, unusual behaviors, mood, physical activity and all that, people will notice that there's a shift in your behavior, then they report you. Or there will be certain criminal activities, because sometimes there is diversion. When it comes to the prescribed opioids, like tramadol, petidine, and the rest, those can be prescribed, but when people are addicted to them, they can steal from their workplace. They can take it from their patient who are supposed to be given this painkiller. They can steal it from them, replace it with other things. And when they are found out, they may be reported, especially if they are lucky to have an EAPC, Employer Assistance Program, in place. So these are the things that they are not aware of the dangers associated. They're just going for the benefit, the so-called benefit now, the euphoric effect that they, and then after some time, they have to keep on using more and more. And then there's a lot of financial loss. I've had a lot of patients since 2013 that have joined the Department of Psychiatry, nurses, pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, laborers, market women, who spend literally their entire savings, go borrowing, go stealing, engage in criminal activity just to fund the habit.
In other words, this is like any other synthetic drug, like addiction to it.
It is. See, addiction now is recognized as a chronic brain disorder. It causes changes, structural changes in your brain. It makes you behave in ways that you don't want to. It works on the back of the reward system, the motivation system in our brain. So when you take it, when you take any of these drugs of abuse, there are substances released in your, chemicals released in your brain. It's called dopamine. Now, let me explain it further. When you take water, when you drink water, when you eat food, when you have sex, you release certain levels of dopamine. But when you take these addictive drugs, the level of release of this dopamine, right, is about 50 to 100 to 1,000 times. So it's going to get to a point where you prefer to take these drugs than eating food, having sex, or drinking water. So you realize they wake up, someone who has alcohol use disorder wouldn't want to eat anymore, because when they eat, they don't have the same feel as when they take the alcohol, when they take the tramadol, when they take the tafrodol, because the release of the feel-good chemical, dopamine, is highest with the drugs of abuse than the normal physiological processes. So that's what gets you want to go more and more of that, because you kind of like it.
Hold for me. It means your threshold becomes so high when you take the.
Exactly.
You prefer them,
yes.
Even eating.
Yes, normal life, you prefer this one than, yes.
Let me bring in Mr. Seth Soneke. He is a Deputy Chief Executive, Health Products and Technologies with the Food and Drugs Authority. A very good morning to you, sir. Do we have Mr. Seth Soneke?
Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Please, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you for joining the conversation. Is the Food and Drugs Authority aware of this menace? Before this BBC documentary, were you aware that some of these drugs, Tafrodol, Tamking, Tamdol, and others, were being used in Ghana?
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yes, before this documentary, we were aware because some of our market surveillance activities have come across some of these products in our system. But what I can say is that we have not given market authorization or registered any of those products. The Tafrodol, for example, or the Timakin, which was in the BBC documentary. So it means that before you can bring in importation from India, you need an import permit. That is lost. And so we have not processed the permit with respect to these products because they are not registered, and our prescribers never even prescribe them to people. So yes, we have been aware because there have been seizures, in times past. In fact, even last 2 years, there was a transit consignment that was going to Niger that narco seized, and which was destroyed just about a week ago because they had to wait and get a court order because that was a goods that was not meant for Ghana. So I would say that yes, we have been aware and we've been working very hard in our market surveillance activities to ensure that we get rid of them wherever we find it.
It's become a major problem. Just a quick one. For how long approximately have you been aware of these developments? For how long?
If you remember, in 2018, for example, and even earlier, there was this issue about tramadol.
Right.
And the media helped us in our nationwide education programs when we realized that the youth were abusing it. Not only tramadol, and also codeine-containing cough syrups, especially the one that was benylin, which was a codeine-containing cough syrup.
Yes.
That led us to advise of health to promulgate anti-psychotic instruments 168 and 167. So the 168, for example, was for tramadol containing products where Ghana you can only register 50 milligrams strength and 100 milligrams strength. And even though internationally it is not a controlled drug, Ghana has made it a controlled product. And even if supplied, can only be supplied at pharmacies. And in terms of the classification of the health system, it can only be prescribed up to the district level. Below the district level, according to that executive instrument, you cannot. Then in terms of codeine-containing cough syrups, we ban it totally because there were better alternatives. So we have been working on this since that time. And we have been having a lot of public education programs. Our regional offices have been in the forefront in making sure that we control these activities. And so it has been an ongoing program. And I must also say that we were contacted by the BBC before this, and the question they put to us is that are these products the tafradol, which contains tapentadol, and the carisoprodol, are they registered products? Have we, and then we said no. But we didn't know the extent of what they were doing. These were questions that they put to us, and we responded back that they are not registered in Ghana, and therefore we do not issue permits for their importation. And therefore, if there's any import, then it means that it has to pass through the back door.
I see. So, there are people who have said that, and we have one of them, joining the conversation here, who have said that some of these products are being sold by pharmacies. That is quite a worry. I don't know to what extent you are aware of the situation. Now, when I posed the earlier question, I do recall the tramadol situation and the benylin and the codeine and cough syrups and all of that. But I was speaking specifically to this latest trend where they are mixing. It's like a cocktail of different things, not just tramadol in there. That was what I was referencing. But on the back of this market surveillance you do, when you find out that maybe there are these drugs on the market, is that to say you confiscate all of them? Is that what happens?
Yeah, so if you find out, because it's not supposed to be used within our health delivery system, so we seize them, and sometimes we even initiate prosecution. But in particular reference to this, in fact, the ones that we seized, there was not even any indication of where it was manufactured from. It is a requirement that when you are bringing any product, we know the location of the manufacturing plant, where we, can know that where it is. So if you realize the product, the manufacturing site is supposed to pass with the information on the leaflet, on the package. By the ones that we seize, or you realize that they only write maybe the constituents, they don't even put in the strength. they put in the overall strength, let's say 225. You don't know whether tapentadol is, let's say, 100 milligrams, and let's say carisoprodol is, let's say, 125 milligrams. That makes the 225. So it's difficult even to trace it to where it is coming from because there's no manufacturing details on the package. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Yes. So,
yes.
That's some of the difficulties we face in controlling it.
Just hold for me briefly. I know you have to attend to my other matters, but hold for me briefly. Coming back into the studio before I go to our other guests. So, what are the consequences of some of these? We know of breathing problems, seizures, and in extreme cases, death. How long does it take for these to manifest?
It varies from person to person. So all these opioids have addictive potential, abusive potential, and once you have tolerance, you just have to keep on using more and more of it. And because you've lost control of use, you tend to keep using and using. Before you know, your respiratory center get depressed and you can just die. That is what people need to know. And if people are aware of these, they will not take the next tablet that somebody sells to them. If they know that they can spend all their money, all their savings and everything, go stealing money, borrowing money, just to fund this behavior, they will not start. If they are aware, they won't start. If they are aware this can kill them, they won't start. So these are things that people need to be.
So the point of trying to nip this in the bud is to prevent people from even starting
at all, yes. And those
and also making them aware of the consequences.
Yes.
It's like cigarette packs. You see there, it is dangerous to your health.
Yes.
I mean, it should be very clear if you are starting, you know
Yes.
that these are the
Yes. And the prescription, at the point of prescription as well, when you start using and you're realizing in yourself that you are beginning to use much more than the doctor prescribed for you, that is one. Or you are doing doctor shopping, hospital shopping, just asking for the same drug. When there are patients who come to you and say, this my pain can only be relieved by tramadol. This my pain can only be relieved by petidine. That is suspicious. At that point, we doctors have to educate the public, the persons involved, the patients, that no, once you're beginning to become dependent on these, the risk involved is death, financial losses, addiction, which is expensive to rehabilitate. People need to be aware of this.
Dr. Kwame Sarpong-Asiedu, looking at the different dynamics, we're hearing from the FDA, we've heard from the Importers Association, we've heard from the medical doctors. Where are the loopholes, really, from where you sit, that we need to plug? I'm not talking about in the medium to long term, I'm talking about in the immediate term.
Thank you. You see, this is a multifaceted problem. And so if we go by the documentary, because that is what has given us the fodder on which we are having this conversation, there are a number of things you see in the documentary that Avio clearly show consignment notes that the products left ports in India. And if they left a port in India by air or ship, they would have to only come to a port in Ghana. We also hear in that documentary that the guys in Avio are saying it's difficult for them to get through ports in Nigeria, but they can get through ports in Ghana, which is further confirmation that they are getting through ports in Ghana. So it's not that down to porous borders. So if we say we are only going to look at porous borders, we might be deceiving ourselves. And I say that because if you look at data from the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime in Senegal, some of us who work in these areas, we know the routes into Sahel and from Sahel into Ghana. We all know the routes. I wouldn't put them out. The FDA knows. I'm quite sure Dr. Dumado as well know. For those of us who work on movement of drugs international commerce, we know these illicit routes. So we know what comes through the borders. The other thing that we need to look at, if you are talking of plugging holes, is that we also know, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, that on our Galamsey sites, combinations of tapentadol and carisoprodol are awash. They are being used widely on our galamsey sites, which further complicates the galamsey fight. So if you ask me what needs to be plugged, we need to plug our ports of entry as a matter of urgency. And that must be multidisciplinary, because I always say the port is controlled by customs. But the other agencies like the FDA, NACOC, and National Security and other things are there as collaborative institutional partners. And it seems to me, if these drugs are getting through, that the collaboration is poor. And that has to be fixed. And that in itself is a security issue that has to be fixed. Because my gut feeling, based on the little background I've done, suggests that perhaps these containers are getting into the ports. The FDA and NACOC are not becoming aware because they've been labeled as something else. Customs is getting it cleared and is getting onto the market. If that is what is happening, and that is fueling our galamsey fight, then the next thing that has to be plugged is that our rehabilitation centers would have to be augmented. Because if we continue with this galamsey fight and we're able to reclaim the forest, assuming we put an effort in it, we would then have these addicts falling off onto the streets because they cannot get the money from galamsey to fuel their habits. And the state would have to deal with them. So that is another gap that we have to proactively plug. We shouldn't allow the problem to happen before we seek solutions. Because the psychiatrist in the studio will be the first to tell you that we do not have enough rehabilitation spaces. We don't even have enough rehabilitation specialists. The final thing we would have to plug is for organizations like the Pharmacy Council and the FDA to stop giving people who are found with some of these medications administrative fines. That's a slap on the wrist. Nobody puts tapentadol and carisoprodol together with the hope of doing any other thing than maiming humankind. And anyone who has that criminal intention should not get an administrative fine. No one brings tramadol 225 into Ghana to come and cure pain. Such a person, if it's found in a pharmacy, like you've said, I have no evidence yet, but I am saying that if people have evidence that is found in the pharmacy and it comes to the attention of the FDA, that pharmacy has to be shut. If it's an over-the-counter seller, it has to be shut. The concept of giving administrative fines for criminal minds who are willing to kill. Because let me tell you, a lot of the people who are harming journalists on galamsey sites are high on these things, and that is why they are able to do the atrocious things they're able to do. We shouldn't treat such people with kids' gloves. Yes, you can ask Erastus. When they go on their raids, you see the wrappers of tramadol, tapentadol and carisoprodol littered all over the destroyed forests. Such people, look, I am not joking. This is a war, and in war, you don't take prisoners.
Crucial points. Right. Dr. Kwame Sapongesiero, you couldn't have said it any better. But let me go to, I'll come to you, Mr. Edumado, but before that, let me go to Mr. Shoneke. So in Ghana, Samos Pharma was pointed at as the entity that was also involved in redistribution or bringing these, drugs, illicit drugs into the country. Have you been able to interact with them at any point? I know that they have denied complicity, but what has been in the interaction with Samos Pharma, Mr. Shoneke?
Okay, so thank you very much. So Samos Pharma, I think as far back as somewhere in January, complained to us that they think that somebody is using their name to import unregistered products, these products which are very dangerous.
They complained to you sometime in what, January? Is that what you said?
Yes, January.
This year?
This year.
Okay.
So since then, we've also begun investigations, but as I speak to you now, we know them as a registered importer, into injectables and eye preparations. And we have at least records of what they have imported into the country in that respect. But we don't have any record of them importing any of these products through our system. But we also found that in 2022 or so and 2023, if I remember, the Avio Pharmaceuticals have been their exporter, which means that they were bringing something from India, which is they have registered a legitimate maybe eye preparations or injectable that they registered, but Avio Pharmaceutical became the exporter for them. That is the only record we have so far. But
and Avio Pharmaceuticals is the same entity that has been producing these illicit drugs, Tam King and others. So that raises some questions, doesn't it? This is not to say that Samos Pharma is involved in illegality, but in the past, they have imported from the same Avio Pharmaceutical.
No, they've not imported from Avio Pharmaceutical. They have Avio Pharmaceutical have been their, has made sure that their luggage or their consignments from India had come to them here in Ghana. That is the record we have. But
so they have worked with them before, but not necessarily imported drugs from them. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Interesting points. Is it something you are delving further into? When are you hoping to come through with some finality on what their involvement has been as far as these illicit drugs are concerned? When?
Yeah, so the investigation is ongoing. Sometimes some of these things take time. Sometimes the data that is put out, when you try to interrogate it, you realize that maybe things are not adding up. So we are still looking into it to see, and we are also bringing on board our collaborators like the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority, so that we will come to the conclusion of it. And I believe that when we find anything concerning all this, we'll be transparent enough to let the public know.
Right. Please hold for me.
I must also say that not long ago, a company in Ghana called Masters Pharmaceuticals engaged Avio to be their contract manufacturer for these items that they brought to our attention that they want to register.
Right.
Of course, it did not include these items, but immediately the action that we have taken is to suspend that activity and also suspend the manufacturing certificate that we have issued to Avio based on an inspection that we carried out last year. So we're also trying to reach out to CDSCO, which is our counterpart in India, to bring to their attention that anytime things like this are coming to Ghana, they should find out from us. Because, for example, I remember when we stopped using chloroquine here in Ghana, and then sometimes our local manufacturers were producing chloroquine tablets, and sometimes we get our local people saying that they are sending it to some of the countries in West Africa. We always get information from our regulators in the countries in West Africa to say that, yes, they are saying that they should bring those, but before we allow it to be exported to them. And so we think that is a good practice that our counterparts in India, CDSCO, must also start doing, so that at least we have information. Because even though this, we here see this as control products, even tramadol inclusive, in the international scale, it is not yet in the control treaty, control products, so it's not captured in the control products treaty. So for control, whenever the import, before even the ship set out in the country of origin, we here in the receiving country get notification. So we're able to say that, no, we have not authorized this to come, or we are, or we are not aware of this, and therefore they do not even allow the ship to sail off or the flights to take it over. So we think that going forward, at least our counterparts in India should also find out from us whenever any of these things is happening. Of course, I think that they themselves do not even know that these activities are going on.
Right.
This documentary will help all of us so that we strengthen our systems. It will also help all of us so that we collaborate better to save. Because just as has been said, it is better to prevent it from coming than when it comes in. That has a lot of difficulty.
Right.
And also transit goods, goods that are supposed to move out. I think going forward, we would like to see so that we can advise also the countries who are receiving them, so that it doesn't just maybe go and maybe sometimes return back in some ways into our system.
Right. Dr. Sedo here was telling me earlier, before we came on air, I believe that this person, Vinod, had been apprehended in India.
That's what I read yesterday, that their governments went to them to confiscate the consignment. He talked about 50 million capsules in their storage.
I think 5 million tablets.
5 million tablets. Yes.
5 million tablets.
5 million tablets, yes. So according to what I read yesterday, they've been...
That is in India.
In India. In India. I don't know how true that is, but of course, that's what I read yesterday.
Which would also impact any companies that are hoping to, do business with them from Ghana. But let me quickly, before I go back to Dr. Sapong Asiedu, let me go to Dr. Edum Ado. There's an important point that Dr. Sapong Asiedu made earlier as part of the solutions. He says these products could be getting into the country because maybe the containers are mislabeled. So you can't tell that this is what they are bringing into the country. And then unwittingly, the ports clear them, and that is how they are getting into the system. How do you think such a problem could be addressed, since you are importers and wholesalers?
Yes, thank you. As Dr. Seneke just said, they're collaborating with their Indian counterparts to ensure that some of these products that have serious socioeconomic consequences when abused will always be referred to them for clearance before it's even loaded. Because over here, unless there's intelligence that had been added previously leading to the landing of those containers, at times they are scanned. So it's not really every container that is open. So the intelligence gathering is very, very important. So I'm glad that Dr. Seneke is proposing that they are going to collaborate with their counterpart, because I know that some time ago in Nigeria, that's what they used to do. Before every product comes, they do the inspection. So even if we can modify it and make sure that all those substances that can be abused, we have some negotiation with the Indian or other countries that they may come from, then it's going to curtail the probability of it going through the system. And also, as Dr. Kwame Sapong said, the punitive action in dealing with some of these things should be strong enough. Because if an illegality makes more profit for you without any consequences, people will just go down that line, from the distributor to the importer to whoever. And normally they do these things underground. So it has to be a coordinated effort right from the country of origin to the country that the product is supposed to be imported. However, as an association, as we said, we are law-abiding companies and will continue to be such, because we feel we have to ensure that we provide very quality products that is available always to our patients. So if anybody or any group of persons outside wants to mess up the system, I think full-scale investigation, multi-sectorial kind of committee has to be set to look into some of these things. And I feel that we have to be more serious about these drug minutes, because since the time of, it's like when the issues come, we talk about it and everybody goes to sleep. When the tramadol issue came, before the tramadol even, the issue of cocaine and all those things have been there. And I think the media houses too should help. You have to find a way of providing free spaces for education.
Yes.
Because, as Dr. Sedo said, education is very critical. Because if people know the consequences of abusing some of these products, at least it will deter some people from starting. Because, as I've said earlier, cost of treatment is very expensive. And having a lot of zombies in the system will mess up our security situation. So it has to be a coordinated effort from the media, from the health institutions, from the security, from the regulator. It has to be on, and also with the legal system. Because if somebody messes up a whole community and the fine is just a slap on the shoulders, then it doesn't send any good signal out there.
Right.
I don't remember the last time that you saw anybody being in prison before because of selling, which was with public. You know, because some of these things, when it's public, and it scares other people not going into it. But when it's just administrative fines and that kind of, then there's no disincentive to stop.
Right.
So as I said, as an association, PIWA will continue to do what is right for the good of the country.
Right. We're concluding on the conversation now. Let me just give you the assurance, at least as long as I have been here, I know that the Ghana AIDS Commission, the malaria campaigns, they come to us all the time and we give them airtime to talk about these things and to give education. And I don't think this will be any different. So we are willing to collaborate, and whatever role we can play, we shall. I'm a very worried man because I'm asking myself, why West Africa? Is it because our borders are porous? Is it because the systems are loose? Is this why we are being targeted? And let's not forget the after effects, violence, crime, and we have some conflicts in the country. I don't want to stereotype by mentioning any places. We have conflicts in the country. If people are using this, even in Galamsey, then it becomes a problem. I'm going to take your final thoughts, gentlemen, and I'll start with Dr. Kwame Sapong. Siedu, about 30 seconds each. If you have anything else to add, and then we can go. Dr. Sapong Siedu.
Thanks. Well, all I'd want to say is we need to take this thing seriously. This, like Dr. Dumado said, this has been going on from at least 2012, at least. And we have been doing hit and run, and the point it has gotten to, if we allow Ghana to become a transit point for the Sahelian jihadists, as the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime is suggesting, the jihadists inadvertently could enter our country. And if they do, we would have ourselves to blame. Because we would have the dual problem of jihadism, Galamsey, that is laced with addicts and zombies. And I don't think our economy, health system, or professionals are ready for that two-trade mix. So we need to get serious.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Seth Soneke, would like to take your final thoughts as well. Very briefly, sir. Yes.
So I would like to say that the Food and Drugs Authority takes this very seriously. And we think that we need to collaborate more with our stakeholders, especially Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority, NACO, Narcotic Control Commission, National Security. And I think that we need to do everything in our power to prevent these things from entering our country. And also, even transit goods, we need to take measures to ensure that we see whatever transit good is going. And in fact, if it is not even a good thing to go to the Sahelian state, we destroy it here in Ghana.
Right.
So that our country will not be used as a transit port. But in the meantime, I think we cannot conclude now, so we are still doing investigations. And I believe that whatever comes out of the investigation will be transparent enough to let the public hear.
Thank you very much for joining the conversation, sir. We wish you the very best. Dr. Sedo here, you have the final word, briefly.
What I would like to say is that trained health professionals, we are aware of the addictive potential and the abuse, and we are aware of the negative consequences. So, if possible, there are prescription opioids, and there are lots of other painkillers and analgesics. So, if possible, we should not even start people on the opioids. We should explore the other options. And those that we may have
that is even as medical professionals.
People, yes. Those that will have to be prescribed opioids, we should educate them the potentials of its addictive power and then abuse, such that when the people begin to notice certain signs and symptoms, such as using more than prescribed, seeking just the same kind of medications all the time, they report early so that we get them the appropriate help. So education is where, and also reaching out to the schools, primary, JSS, SHS, so they know that there are drugs that if you start, you might never be able to stop on your own. And like Dr. Siedu said, it's very expensive when it comes to rehabilitation. It's very expensive, so you don't want to start. And nobody will start to become a junkie. It's because you start using the drug, and then the drug continues to use you.
You start using the drug, and then eventually the drug starts to use you.
Yes.
You lose control. Well, that's how we're going to draw the curtains on this all-important conversation. But it continues. It should continue in our schools, in our homes, at our workplaces, and together we should help resolve this menace. Those who joined us, Dr. Albert Sedo here, you just heard him speak. He's a specialist psychiatrist at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. We also had Dr. William Edum-Addo, pharmacist and president of the Pharmaceutical Importers and Wholesalers Association. Dr. Kwame Sapong-Esiedu, CDD Fellow on Public Health, Ghana, and Mr. Seth Soneke, Deputy Chief Executive, Health Products and Technologies at the FDA. We'll be back with more conversations. What's the TUC saying about the mass sackings of public sector workers? We'll be telling you about that after the break.